Part 6. The Turning Point. You think you can run from danger? Think again. It's not always the monster you need to fear, it's the ones who look just like you. The more you learn about what's really happening on campus, the harder it becomes to separate fact from fiction. You know you're being hunted, but can you escape before it's too late? And what happens when the person you trust the most might be one of them? You begin to suspect that one of your closest friends might not be who they say they are. The more you investigate, the more their behavior starts to feel off. You've already gotten too close, and now you're wondering if you'll make it out alive. It all started a few weeks ago when you first noticed something was wrong. First, it was subtle, small, almost imperceptible changes in the way your friend Kyle acted. He'd laugh at the wrong moments, stare at people with unnerving intensity, or just seem to know things he shouldn't. You tried to dismiss it at first, thinking maybe it was just stress or maybe he was just going through a phase. Everyone's been acting weird lately, right? But the more time passed, the more you couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It was like there was a part of Kyle you didn't know anymore. He'd make strange comments like how he never really understood human emotions or how he preferred to be around the dead. You remember the first time he said it. It was during a late-night study session in the library. Kind of place that felt almost alive with the whispers of old pages turning, the smell of ink and paper, and the faint creak of chairs. But when Kyle said those words, it chilled you to the bone. There were other moments too. The way he seemed to be around when you needed him, but always just a step too close, too available. Almost like he was watching you. No, scratch that, he was watching you. You noticed him staring at your reflection in the glass windows of the library once, and when you caught him, he didn't even flinch. Just smiled, that unsettling grin of his. A grin that didn't seem to reach his eyes. Then there were the rumors that started circulating around campus. Strange disappearances. People vanishing without a trace. First, you thought it was just campus gossip, students exaggerating or pulling pranks. But as time went on, it became harder to ignore. People started showing up with wide, terrified eyes, speaking in hushed voices about things they couldn't explain. Most of them, you realized, had crossed paths with Kyle recently. You tried to ask him about it, tried to confront him directly, to call him out on the weirdness. But every time you brought it up, he'd laugh it off, making some offhand remark like, "You worry too much. It's just a phase everyone goes through in college." You didn't buy it. So you did what anyone would do when they feel like they're in danger: dig deeper. You began shadowing him, watching his every move. You'd show up early to class just to observe, trying to see if he'd act different. And sure enough, you saw it. He'd disappear for long periods of time, always at the same hours, only to return with no explanation. You knew you had to know where he was going, and you weren't about to let him off the hook this time. One night you followed him. He didn't seem to notice, too consumed with his own thoughts as he walked across campus in the dead of night. You trailed him from a distance, hiding behind trees and weaving through the shadows, making sure you were never seen. Finally, after what felt like hours, Kyle led you to an old, abandoned building on the outskirts of the campus. A place no one had been brave enough to go near for years. The windows were shattered, the door was rusted, and there was an aura of death that hung around the place like it had been forgotten by time. He paused at the door, glancing over his shoulder as if sensing your presence, but you froze, holding your breath. He didn't see you. And then he walked inside. You waited for what felt like an eternity, unsure of what you were supposed to do next. You thought about turning back, about calling it a night, but you couldn't. Your instincts screamed at you to keep going. So, against your better judgment, you crept inside after him. The inside of the building was dark, the air thick with dust. Your heart was pounding in your chest, your hands trembling as you tried to silence your breath. But then you heard something. The unmistakable sound of Kyle's voice. Only. It wasn't just his voice. You stepped closer to the source of the sound, careful not to make any noise. The words were muffled, but you could make out some parts. "They think I'm one of them. They'll never know." The voice was Kyle's, but something was wrong. Sounded off. Like he was speaking in two different tones at once, or like there was someone else talking through him. You squinted in the dark, trying to make out anything, when suddenly a sharp laugh echoed through the building. You nearly jumped out of your skin. It wasn't Kyle who laughed. It came from another direction. You spun around, your pulse racing. The sound was coming from the far end of the room. A figure emerged from the shadows, tall and thin, draped in a dark cloak. It wasn't just any person, though. This figure had an aura to them. Something unnatural, unsettling. You couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Your feet felt glued to the ground. Then you saw it. Kyle wasn't alone. He was with them. The figure stepped closer, and for a split second, the light flickered enough for you to see their face. It was pale, almost ghostly, with dark circles under the eyes. Their smile was twisted in a way you couldn't comprehend. It wasn't a smile, it was more of a grimace, an expression of something ancient and malevolent. "Did you think you could escape?" the figure whispered in a voice that wasn't quite human. "You've already been marked." Your blood ran cold. You stumbled back, knocking something over. The noise was deafening in the silence. The figure turned toward you, its eyes locking with yours, and for a moment everything went still, like time had frozen. And then Kyle's voice, his real voice, cut through the silence. "Run!" But it was too late. In a panic, you sprinted out of the building, your heart pounding in your ears. Behind you, you could hear footsteps, soft but persistent. You didn't dare look back. You didn't need to. You could feel it. They were right behind you. As you neared the exit, the door slammed shut with a deafening bang, trapping you inside. The room seemed to close in on you, suffocating you with darkness. You scrambled at the door, but it wouldn't budge. The figure's voice echoed from every corner of the room. "You should have never come here. You think you can outrun the inevitable?" And then Kyle appeared before you, his eyes hollow, his smile impossibly wide. "I warned you," he whispered. It wasn't just him anymore. There was something else inside him. Something old, something hungry. Something that had been waiting for the right moment to take over. You're trapped and there's no way out. The thing that's been hunting you isn't just some creature in the dark. It's Kyle. It's your friends. It's everyone you thought you could trust. You've crossed a line and now you're paying the price. Whatever was in that abandoned building, whatever Kyle is now, it's already too late. Turning point has come. If you want to know what happens next, you're going to have to stay tuned.